Game on, everybody, and welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to be discussing the current meta trends of this week. Let's get started. As a quick reminder, I just want to go ahead and showcase to you guys the quick breakdown as far as what we have for when we are discussing the meta. And if you guys are interested in obtaining this spreadsheet information for yourself, please consider joining my Discord because this is available on my Discord channel. So I'd greatly appreciate it if you join me there, and you guys can go ahead and feel free to access this and basically get all this information when it gets updated live. But of course, I'll try to make my weekly videos regarding this. But here is now the new meta trends for this breakdown. And as you guys can see here, I went ahead and made a minor change as well to this. I added also the color distribution. And at the top, currently we have Ruby Sapphire as the most dominant deck in at least 32 or greater players metagame. But surprisingly, and you'll see in the further as we go, that Amber Steel seems to be a much more represented deck, but I guess the conversion rate isn't that much popular within the meta. But we'll go over through a bunch of different new deck lists and see some new updated versions of them. But yeah, this is kind of exactly where I'm seeing the meta is. Ruby Sapphire tends to be one of the more stronger decks in the meta, very good counter versus Amber Steel. And then Ruby Amethyst always there to be basically the most consistent deck, and then Amber Steel kind of slowly approaching. This is me referencing the greater than 32. But if you guys want another more all top cut breakdown results, you can go ahead and reference that here. And let's go ahead and get started and looking into the different deck lists. I will also briefly say that if you guys are interested in submitting your deck list results and your winnings, just go ahead and join my Discord, send me proof, or even send it on Twitter and tag me in Twitter and let me know how many players were populated at your tournament for that and what place you got. And depending on your breakdowns that you received, I'll go ahead and add it to this list for everybody to also view. That way, when I also do these little breakdowns for the meta, I can go ahead and link your link directly into the spreadsheet for everybody else to reference. Also, as a side note, if you guys also want access to the different staple breakdowns and ratios or the average ratios, please consider using my TCG affiliate link in the description box below or on this spreadsheet. And I would greatly appreciate it because any type of transaction with my affiliate link at no extra cost to you will be supporting my channel. So thank you in advance for your support. And again, thank you to all my Patreon subscribers, and everybody, please consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribe because your interactions do greatly help me in the long run in YouTube. Truthfully, those little interactions go a long way, so thank you. The first deck list we're going to talk about is a Ruby Amethyst deck. So the reason why I wanted to highlight this deck in particular is because it is featuring a brand new card in set 5, which is Elsa, the 5th spirit. You can see it on the 3rd row, 2nd column. And this card is a great card overall, but I'm not too keen about this particular list because I'm not insanely crazy about the Lady Tremaine. I feel as if we can play maybe more Mauis or another copy of Madame Medusa and another copy of Maui. And this deck list also did opt to play the one Elsa Spirit of Winter as the shift target, and I think that's a pretty solid option. These are, I mean, I'm not, history has shown that I'm not really a Ruby Amethyst player. This isn't my favorite deck to play, but it does exactly what it is expected to do. It's just an overall very consistent deck, but not much has changed here except we're now including the Elsa, the 5th spirit. Some cards that I would like to see in this list is maybe the library, but I digress. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next list. One deck that I am pretty excited about is the Sapphire Steel mid-range kind of strategy deck, and we can see that it is opting to play some newer cards. Cusco, the Selfish Emperor, really does help improve the deck's weaknesses overall, and including cards like Tipo and Pete from the set 5 is a great inclusion just because Tipo on 2 is, in my opinion, the better ramp option than one jump ahead and or Mickey Mouse, Detective Mickey Mouse. So this is a great option. It even respects the aggro decks or the lower to the floor kind of decks with Captain Hook, Forceful Duelist, and even Fire the Cannon. So this is a really solid deck, and I strongly think this is probably what these decks will look like from the future, this going forward. One thing I do wish I would like to see, just because I'm really biased about this, is having the one aerial, the one with ward, that if you have more items than your opponent, it quests for 5. Fantastic card, but I also noticed this deck is only playing 2 Tamatoas, And usually I wouldn't mind seeing less Tamatoas, a minimum of like 3 in an item heavy deck. But the lack of Mufasa is a little bit surprising just because this deck does have the ability to ramp up into those higher ink counts. But I mean, it ended up working out for this player, so great job for them. Our next deck we're going to talk about is Emerald Steel. So this version is technically a more Chief Bogo, Floodborn shift damage kind of strategy that is playing Morph, and basically Morph can be a shift target into any of the topper end of this strategy. It's including cards like Pete, Game Referee, which is a fantastic card overall, just because it, if when played time like correctly, it can really shut down your opponent's like game plans and force your opponent to come up with a different answer. But with cards like Diablo, which is an evasive character, it's such a problematic card to kind of like play around those evasive characters, because the main answer to Diablo is usually actions or another evasive character, and most people just aren't doing that. I thought it was very interesting that this deck is including 6 shiftable Clarabelles when Morph really is enough, but I guess really favoring that whole shift line. So arguably, I think it would be maybe beneficial to cut down on the Clarabelle of the 3 cost, and maybe include an extra copy of Chief Bogo and maybe another Grab Your Sword. But this deck overall looks pretty darn solid, and I do love the inclusion of Morph, and I do love the whole shift mechanic, and great deck overall. Now, moving on to one of my favorite decks in the format that I've been really trying to get going is we have Sapphire Amethyst, and I kind of like to call this one ramp bounce kind of strategy, playing a lot of the Madame Mims and Merlins and such. In my personal list, I am playing the Shift Merlin. Most people would maybe consider that as like a trap, only just because like there's not really that many great shiftable answers yet. But I really think if you do include the Shift Merlin, you can really cut down on the top end cards, because now it makes everything searchable and you can kind of like look for those key answers. But this player seems to be much more in favor of basically playing multiple copies of the top end cards. So then that way they don't need they basically lack the need of trying to search for a specific answer. They can just hopefully play more copies and consistently see it more than not. But clearly this deck has been proven to itself. Very interesting to see more copies of the library over the Queen's Castle. But I have lately been seeing people kind of swapping between playing more libraries over the Queen Castle. I'm personally at a 3-3 split at the current moment, just because like they both are really great cards. One is more like, I like to use library as like an aggressive card, where I'll move a character there and then I'll challenge a character while it's there, and when that character is banished or removed from play, I end up getting to draw a card, so I'll go +1 in those interactions. And then the Queen's Castle is much more of a defensive card, in the sense of like, well, now you have to answer me, because if you don't answer this character, I'm going to end up drawing multiple cards on multiple occasions. Very interesting to see this deck play Yzma. I don't know if this card is necessarily super required now. I mean, I have a really kind of hard time deciding if this is a card that justifies the spot, but clearly it is working out for this player. Also seeing Hades in here as a 7-drop uninkable. It does have a very unique interaction with this deck, only because like when you can play this card, you can end up bouncing it back and then using the Hades again to basically banish a character into your opponent's inkwell. So there's a lot of value there. And also only 2 Merlin Goats. Very interesting here, because I would suggest maybe maxing out on the Merlins and cutting down the Merlin Crabs down to 2. Just because in my personal playtesting, 2 Merlin Crabs seems to be like good enough. And Merlin Goat is just, you know, literally the goat of cards. So maybe cutting Yzmas and putting in some Merlin Goats, I don't know. But overall, this is a really interesting deck overall. I don't know if this deck necessarily even needs the 1-drops, but having the Chernobog followers on the library is a really great interaction, that when you quest for Chernobog followers, you can go ahead and banish it and then end up drawing 2 cards instead of the 1. So very great deck overall. I do love to see this deck. It's a very fun deck for sure. So if you guys are ever interested in this is probably what the deck overall looks like, and I suggest you guys give it a shot. Up next, we have Ruby Mufasa. But this one is only playing 4 actions, 3 brawl, and 1 revive. And you guys already know how I personally feel about Mufasa decks if you guys already are fans of the channel. But I do like the inclusion of revive in a deck like this because a lot of cards are just very playable. You can see in the first row and then up to revive, every one of those cards are revivable, with the exception of brawl, of course, because that's not a card you play to revive a card. But I like this deck in the aspect of like they're trying different action cards and seeing what works. Revive is a great combo piece with Mufasa because now you can use it as even maybe as an like an aggro threat because it just keeps coming back, and then boom, we got a new character on the board. This deck favoring the Mulan, the one that comes in damage, into the Shift Mulan as the form of board clear, and we're using Scar, the vicious cheater, to basically as the be prepared but on legs for board clear. So this deck is pretty I mean, it's cool, but definitely not one of my favorites. I also find it very interesting that Wreck-It Ralph makes an appearance here. It is a very big statted character, and to get it off the Mufasa is pretty punishing for the opponent. And a lot of the bigger top ends, such as Sisu, if you reveal that and get it into play off the Mufasa, that's also another way to kind of deal with your opponent's boards. Gaston definitely being one of the most important characters in this deck, so ideally you'll want to kind of hard mulligan for this card for the strategy to kind of give you some pseudo ink and such. And another card interesting to note here is the Flynn Rider, the one that is the 2 quest for 1, 2-drop 2/2 quest for 1, and then if you have the higher statted strength character on board, you gain 3 lore. So maybe that's part of the more aggressive strategy for this, because you can see on like the top end itself we have like Julieta and Sisu. I mean, Sisu does make an appearance here, but anytime that I've seen people play this deck, it's you're really kind of lacking like the draw engine. So that's why we max out on the Rapunzel. So having more ways to draw cards in the strategy is probably more than ideal. That's why I like cards like Invitation to the Ball in this deck, because that's basically like always gonna hit, or you're least likely to hit. And whenever I play this deck, I always try to hard mulligan for actions in my hand, so that way Mufasa will hit. But like I said, not really one of my favorite decks. It is one of those Ruby decks. If I'm playing Amber Ruby, I want to play more of a song variant over Mufasa. But I think I've kind of stretched up enough time talking about this deck, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Next one is my favorite deck of all time, Amber Steel Song. This one kind of is a more aggro kind of strategy. We have Cinderella and Daisy Duck and Robin Hood on the lower end for our 1-drops. And realistically, this deck kind of really caps out on the need of 5 ink. Even though Cinderella is for 7, you only really use her for shift, and she's a shift 5. So this deck really just kind of caps out at 5 ink whenever you play it. One thing I did want to bring up is that this is probably the only deck that would play for Prince Naveen, but I don't even think that's necessarily correct. In my personal list, I'm playing about 3 Prince Naveens. And even then, I kind of want to even drop them down to 2, just because like when I'm playing A Whole New World, so the line is basically Daisy Duck or Robin Hood into Smee, and then into Ariel, and then once we get into turn 4, we're either going to sing A Whole New World with Ariel, or on turn 4 we play Naveen, and then we get to play A Whole New World for free. But what's really awkward, I think, with the Naveen strat is that on turn 4 you play Naveen, you used all of your ink to then play A Whole New World for free, and then you get a fresh new hand, and now you have like no ink to play with. So that is one awkward interaction that I've noticed, and I'm not too typically sure if this is maybe even the best strat. But regardless though, we're kind of like when we play the Queen shift line, we're A Whole New World on turn 2 for extreme disruption on the opponent's turn. But these ratios are overall pretty solid. I would definitely consider cutting down Naveen to play like another copy of Grab Your Sword at the bare minimum. I like to personally play like 3 because I really respect aggro. And this is kind of just what Steel Song is for the time being. Another new interesting deck that made its way into the meta is this green bounce deck, or this emerald amethyst bounce deck. And it definitely is a more focused line on the Clarabelle. And one card I really enjoy is the Emerald Chromacon, because during your opponent's turn, whenever one of your characters is banished, you may return chosen characters to their player hand. And that just seems to be an amazing tempo swing. Or even you can manipulate your own characters and bounce your own characters if like you have the goat in play or the rabbit in play, and then the follow-up you can play him again. One card though that I do like in this deck is the Anna Diplomatic Queen, just because she's a 3-drop that can also be bounced multiple times to really get multi-use out of her effects. But that's why there's only like 2 copies in this deck, because it's more of a tech card that is pretty flexible on what it's capable of doing. I'm not too sure why this deck opted to play the Pegasus without the Shift Pegasus. I guess really to attack any like evasive characters, or maybe as an evasive card to basically just like be a body that is like a free bounce card, and then maybe on the follow-up you ink it. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, especially when you have Elsa as the 5-drop to basically be the card that deals with evasive targets. So I don't know, you guys let me know what's that all about. And then on the top end, we have the 3 Clarabelles and the 3 Ursula. So that is basically just a way for your opponent to have to hard play removal cards. And Clarabelle, if your opponent is basically getting their hands super full of cards because you're bouncing everything back at the end of the turn, you just end up drawing the rest of your deck. So I do like that interaction. That's why I really do think Emerald Chromacon is a great card. So if you guys can fit 1 copy of it in your Emerald decks, I strongly recommend it. And also Lyle Tiberius. This is also a really great card. I think Lore Burn is pretty underrated, and when a card has it as like a bonus effect, I feel like that's like the difference in lore. Sometimes you just need your opponent to be like 1 lore away from game, so you can follow up and win on that extra turn. So don't sleep on this card. I think it's also a really great card. And then our last deck that I wanted to quickly talk about is Ruby Sapphire, because this does seem to be the big bad of the format, one of the more consistent toolboxy kind of decks. And this one's still opting to play Ice Block. So I mean, maybe Ice Block last format wasn't that great, but more decks than enough are going back into playing Ice Block. And I think that maybe because this deck has much more wiggle room and time to play it, because with Bucky out of the meta, your hand isn't being severely ripped apart anymore. But I don't know, I'm still not really crazy about this deck. And we do have the Little Sisu, which is a nod to like those aggro decks. And if this color combo is playing against an aggro strategy, hard mulliganing for Sisu is a great way to kind of deal with those. Or even then you can just use Brawl. So add 6 different copies to like deal with aggro, and then you want to just ramp up to the end game. 4 Vision of the Future, great card, love that card. And Hideaway, 3 copies. I think that might be too many, but clearly this worked out. And I'm also surprised to see Chicha in this list as well, because most decks seem to be running Tipo over Chicha. I mean, Chicha is a great card, because when you are double inking with Ink for Turn and then Fishbone Quill, or even Donald Duck or One Jump Ahead in this specific deck, you'll be drawing an extra card. But and with the ability of support as like a secondary support, realistically, you quest with her and then you give an additional strength to another character. But I feel like whenever you have Chicha on board, she's so much better when you don't quest with her, unless you know your opponent has like wide removal, such as like Grabber Swords or Tinkerbell. You kind of just want to try to maximize your value. But this deck, this is basically one of the more standard lists. Like I said, 3 Hideaway seems like a little bit too much. I personally would prefer Cusco. But with copies of Vision of the Future, it really ups the consistency of the deck overall. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what these decks look like for now. Quickly again, I just want to go ahead and remind everybody that if you guys are interested in my spreadsheets that host the data, I update them basically every day, and I try to make a video once a week on my findings and such. And if you guys want to submit your own data, please consider also submitting them to me on my Discord channel or tagging me on Twitter, and then I'll go ahead and link your social medias with the spreadsheet and all. And I look forward to updating this over the Set 5 meta. So thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you guys in the next video. I'm out of here.